Om te dhyan yoga nugata pasyan, Adhyatma shaktim svagunayar nagudam, Yaha karanani nikilani tani, Kalatma yuktanya adidishtat kaha. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. Practicing the yoga of meditation, the ancient rishis of India perceived the divine energy existing everywhere and in everything, which, though obscured and covered by its own modes of nature, was nevertheless one and indivisible, and which had been incomprehensible earlier due to the limitations of the mind and intellect. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Aresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatcha Akanda Rupa Stitir Eva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dandvaititam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamashadi Laksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Triguna Rahitam Sadgurum Tannamami. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one as the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we through that grace go beyond darkness and delusion and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Satyena Om Satyena Labhyastapassa Hyesatma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmayohi Shubraha Yam Pashanti Atayaha Kshina Doshaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self within, is realized by knowledge, by moderation, by austerity, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it everywhere, existing in everything, even here in this very mind and body. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. We meet this morning at the SRV Associations in Portland, Oregon to begin to dig deeper into the 6th chapter of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. And yesterday we looked into the first 3 slokas, and today we'll be sort of revolving around slokas 1 through 9, and with some visuals and charts to illustrate the points and to clarify, because yesterday we said clarification and intensification is really sort of the grist for the mill of spiritual life. We want to be able to see through the appearances of Maya in the way quantum physics is beginning to see, yet in a deeper way, not outward but inward, as Christ said. The further outward we go, the more we see the shifting sands of relative existence. But the further inward we go, the closer we get to that bedrock of the spirit. And that's what these first 8 or 9 slokas of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad are really pointing us towards, talking about, as you remember yesterday, the glory of God, that is, God with form, Ishvara, and everything that spills out of it in waterfall-like fashion, trickling down to the most far distant or far-flung piece of matter that exists. But then marching back inward at the behest of consciousness, that is awareness, which is our true nature, not matter, back into the kingdoms of heaven within you that Christ talked about, which began to breach that ultimate reality which is formless. All forms to be taken as a symbol for the existence of formless nature. And the fact that the formless nature cannot be seen here is inferred by the presence of form. And then when form disappears tonight in deep sleep, you're also to infer that matter has gone back into its indeterminate phase, or back into its unmanifested prakriti. That is, a form of nature that is just the insentient material or energy of matter. But overseeing all of that is this Atman, which we just chanted about, or Brahman. You can use either of those words in Vedanta, or you can use other words like Purusha in the ancient Sankhya. And we looked at that yesterday as well, and take a little bit of a look at it today. Purusha means the indweller in the city of 9 gates. So you have these senses, 5 senses, that with these 9 apertures going outward only. And the idea of the yogis is that you shut them off for a while at least, and take the energy from them, like the power of the eye to see and the power of the ear to hear, which are actually not flaps of skin or fleshy orbs, but an energy by which man does not live by bread alone. It's that power of the senses that's there. And take that inside and store it up, and use it to penetrate deeper and deeper levels of your own consciousness. That would be a cosmology that you could rely upon, that you could begin to explore in your deepest contemplations. And that's called an inner life. Once you start doing that, you actually have an inner life. And we see most of the percentage of mankind in this day and age devoid of such a life, as the fishermen along the river were when Jesus came along, and John the Baptist wanted to immerse them in water. See, there's a very deep symbology to. It's not just a bath that makes you feel all of a sudden better and elated and you sing hallelujah. Water is actually a principle to meditate upon, because it's the flow or liquidity that is in the mind of God, is the idea of water first. As Vivekananda used to say, there's a clay cup and then there's the thought clay cup, and this outer one can be destroyed. Of course, you can get another one, so even the finite is infinite, as the peace chants say. But the real connection there is that the thought clay cup cannot be destroyed, short of going into an absolutely formless state, like deep sleep or a non-dual meditation, or death, or samadhi, which is the, of course, definitive non-dual state. Death leaves too much to chance, and you might have to either come back into the fetus when you're born next time, stripped of all, or as we were saying yesterday, shorn, like the sheep, of all its warmth and all its knowledge, and have to rediscover it over and over and over again, which is, of course, not ideal. Or you could come back into this life following the thread of your yoga and picking up that knowledge, remembering what you learned, in the previous lifetime. That's more the ideal, or at least the penultimate ideal. The illumined souls, of course, know the inner world and the outer world, the gross body and the subtle body, backwards and forwards, and have explored it in their meditations, and then know where they're going after death and know where they're coming when they come back into the body. That's called a conscious future birth that we're working on, and those beings who have had their first conscious death after living their first conscious or awakened lifetime are the best guides for us. And that's another scenario for you at the time of passing from your body, that one of these great souls stands over your bed and starts to read out the Tibetan Book of the Dead or some such text and begins to guide you inward, because your outer senses may be turned off, but your inner senses are still active and hovering around that form, still attached to body, still attached to air, earth, fire, water, and ether, which Buddha said are your 5 desires, the 5 desires of collective humanity, and that you would want to let go of one by one. Of course, better to do it before death, and then you won't feel the burning of the eyes and the dryness of the mouth and the wavering mind like a candle in a windy place. You will just exit the body swiftly and smoothly and in peace, as we see some people do. The thing about that is that people who are not enlightened yet, fully enlightened, leave the body in peaceful state, but they're leaving in sattva, and we looked at that yesterday. They hit the roulette wheel right. The time of death happened right when they were in a state of revelation, that is, in a state of balance, and they could have just as easily been in a state of activity or laziness, sleepiness. And if they exited the body in those, Krishna says, the restless go to the wombs of the restless, and the slothful go to the realm of the slothful, the womb of the slothful, that is, which is a womb without a view. And the sattva is a room with a view. That is, you get this inward look into the kingdoms of heaven within you, which, by the way, are not absolute reality. They are realms of name and form. They're more in your mind. Everything is in the mind in these traditions. These are called mind-only schools. Buddhism, Vedanta, Yoga, and so forth. And they know that the mind is there as the intermediary for everything that falls below it. If you wanted to, we already went through that yesterday, if you wanted to look at everything that falls below mind, you would just take this 24 cosmic principle chart from the ancient Samkhya Yoga and take mind-ego complex and see how out of ego spills mind and senses, and then that is cognitive senses and active senses, and then out of the insentient side of the picture falls the 5 subtle elements and the 5 gross elements. These are 5, 10, 15, 20, 24. If you add chitta, the thought process, to it, which was done later in Indian philosophy, you would have 25. So everything comes in 5s, and that's what we were looking at when we got interrupted by the end of class yesterday, the quintuplication process, and how everyone from Samkhya to Yoga to Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, rejuvenation in 700 AD, drew sharply and strongly on the quintuplication process. And Father of Yoga used it as a station for meditation. He wanted you to reconnect earth with smell, water with taste, fire with sight, air with touch, and ether with hearing. And if you made those connections, you had a beginning to this inner life that Christ talked about. Of course, Patanjali was probably some 150 years after Christ, they say, when he re-systematized or regathered the yoga from ancient times past, all these yogas that Krishna was speaking about in the Gita. So if he saw this quintuplication process, then he wanted to use it as a way of connecting you to these inner principles called tattvas. He wanted you to know about the building blocks of not just the external universe by studying chemistry and so forth, but the principles, the elements of the internal universe, and begin to familiarize yourself or re-familiarize yourself with this kingdom of heaven within, these chambers of God's mansion, So by doing that, connecting them one to one like that, you start a process in. And I have a book coming out called Dissolving the Mind Stream, which will be out within probably a month. And it shows you the classic yogic and Vedantic way of doing that and guides you through it. And I have some of my students already practicing that every day in meditation. They're actually dissolving everything back mentally. It's a mental process, back into Brahman or into their self, and then they come out again and open their eyes. And so it's you might say it's sort of like a wax apple. Ramakrishna used to say, you see a wax apple across the room and it makes you thirsty or hungry. But you go and look at it and you find it's not the real article. But it does make you go out to the store and buy one and devour it, hopefully as prasad after you've blessed it. But it's not the real article means this dissolving the mind stream is sort of a simulation experience you're doing. Like if you're going to go out into outer space where there's no gravity, then you better get into some machine on Earth where there is gravity and practice it, you see. And by doing so, then you have sort of opened up the steps to this meditation, and then you just sit and you have this knowledge, and it begins to occur to you over time as you practice. These steps actually occur to you, and you place your foot on them. You start the path. That's also true at the time of death. You practice death before you die when you meditate. That's one of the reasons the Buddhists and the Swami Vivekananda said that you're really doing, the Zen Buddhists call this a zafu, this round pillow you sit on, and they ask you occasionally in Zazen, have you died on your zafu yet? So they want you to know if you've experienced the ego death. That is, the ego right here, because you start to march in toward the intellect, which is shining with the light of Mahat, the great mind. And so that's what I was just saying. Everything below mind falls into a denser vibration, and everything above mind, all the way up to insentient nature, that is unmanifested nature, and the individual self, called Purusha, the indweller in the 9 gates, falls deeper and deeper inside you and gets you closer and closer to that divine reality. So this is knowing the building blocks of your inner universe and becoming familiar with it. And if you were to memorize these and meditate on them, then you would never have the feeling of being lost at the time of death again. You'd always have something to fall back on. Or if you came back into the body and you were growing, then these would occur to you somewhere in your early childhood, hopefully by dharmic parents that teach you that, which is what we're missing here in the West and in this world, for the most part, to have this taught you at a very early age. Like I was teaching a 4-year-old boy just 2 days ago to sit with me in meditation and straightening his back and telling him how to breathe, and very much enjoying the fact that this young lad would have some instruction at a very early age. Probably by doing that, you're really not teaching him anything new. You're just really opening up the possibility that he will see his past lifetimes. When we see our past lifetimes, it's not like I was Mary Queen of Scots or I was Elvis or whatever, the silly stuff they talk about in New Age circles. It's basically that you were always the Atman. You were always this unchanging spirit. You never are anything but that. I and my Father are one kind of idea. But you're just seeing more, not your personality, because that's gone, as the Buddhists say, actually totally gone. And you're just bringing back bits of your past lifetime that were important. That means very terrifying bits and very illuminating bits, and mixed bits too, that are in between. This is called Sanchita, Prarabdha, and Agami karmas. You see, you're bringing back these remembrances of these karmas, and if you do, you can resolve them. The reason you have come back into the body is because they're left unresolved. So if you have a chance to live again in a more conscious way with dharmic teachings early on, these will come up, and you'll be able to dispense them. See, otherwise they fester. They cause samskaras later in the mind, which are impressions, like grooves running a record, and a needle can't get out, sticking. So this art of divine remembrance, Smriti Bedu, is based upon these collection of memories you have back inside of you that are very profound, and sometimes profound in a negative way, as we say. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say, if you have a boil and it comes up all of a sudden on your arm, then you go to the doctor and he taps it. It's very hard still. You see, I can't lance it. You have to come back in about 2.5 days. So he prescribes for you a return. And you come back, and by that time it's all soft on top. You see, I won't go into the details. And then he says, perfect. And he takes a scalpel and makes a little incision, and all the poison's out, and pretty soon that is gone. So that's what he's talking about, these samskaras in the mind. They're hidden problems that only come out in a group like this, when you're forgetting about matter and desire and objects and worries and brooding and thoughts and work and children and family. You're just remembering, you're just focusing on Brahman alone, on reality alone, and that's why you're there. And it's at that time that these impediments come up. That's the beauty of Maya, yes. Name, form, time, space, and causality, we said yesterday. That's another quintuplication. That's a very stiff and problematic one. So Maya will come up just as a matter of course. It's not like it's sentient, like some evil devil out to get you. It's just the nature of covering power, avarani shakti, or veiling power. Same thing, or distorting power. See, that's vikshepa shakti. So that will just rise up naturally, which is again why some people live lives very sort of even and peaceful and moral and so forth, and they don't get to these deep problems. They don't come up because they haven't put themselves in an atmosphere which they will come up. That's not a good thing, as they will rise up at the time of death, or they'll rise up in another lifetime, or they will rise up in a very difficult situation in life. All of a sudden you'll be face to face with it, and you won't have the light of the teacher there. You won't have the light of the sangha, the group there. And so if they rise up in an atmosphere of meditation and spiritual company, they can get lanced quickly. So otherwise they can cause samskaras, or there's really no words in English for it, but mental impressions that wear grooves deep into the subconscious mind. So these tendencies that rise up in you then are negative, mixed, and positive. And the way I can connect that and make it a little bit clearer for you is that if you are swimming one day and you all of a sudden have a fear of water, then this has occurred to you that you drowned before. You see, that's why your fear is there. Other people can just jump in and swim without that fear. Or you have two dogs, like I did when I was younger, and one jumps in the water and one doesn't. You see, they have a recent memory in their psyche about having drowned, and so they stay away. Well, the other one doesn't have that. See, so for one thing, this is why we must look into the relative truth of past lifetimes, reincarnation. It's very important. One lifetime scenario will not help us very much at all. In fact, it will end up impeding our inner life. But you may be meditating one day, and that's what I was coming from. Patanjali says meditate on water, on fire, on air, on earth, and especially on ether, because if you meditate on ether, you begin to leave this physical ether and you find out that there are at least 3 or 4 other kinds of ether inside of you. Those are the kingdoms of heaven within you, and they're not made of atomic particles. They're made of a different kind of particle that can't be seen, tasted, touched, heard, and smelled, like your dream state tonight. You've got a different kind of particle there. You're construing worlds of name and form with your own inner senses out of 5 inner elements, aren't you? And you're destroying them and creating them and destroying them. So if you begin to know how to do that consciously, then you'll be able to live a divine life. You can come out here to this world, and as Ramana Maharshi said, say, well, I've just coming to another dream. My dream state last night was dream number 1, and I've just come to number 2 here, dream number 2. And they're both being constructed and being broken down all the time. One by my deep sleep state, and the other one by my dream state. And it's my mind that's doing it, it's not God or devil that's doing it. So then all of a sudden you're in possession of your own inner faculties again. So whichever way you approach it, knowing the 24 cosmic principles is very important. And Shvetashvatara Upanishad is beginning to talk about the glory of God, because we can talk about this as a mere cosmology, but we can also talk about it as an inner life, because the soul is actually experiencing all this. This is spilled out of the soul, and Prakriti in its unmanifested nature would be the first thing to spill out. It's where everything goes, where your great-grandfather went there and your baby is coming out of there as matter, you see, as bodies, as planets, as principles. But the consciousness does not go in and out of that. Consciousness is it, is the very thing out of which those things are coming and going. So it doesn't come out of unmanifested state and go back into a manifested state. It's supremely unmanifested. And that's how Krishna puts it in the Gita. So we should reread those first 3 slokas to set us back on the path of yesterday's class. Some deluded thinkers speak of nature, others of time, as the force that revolves the wheel of Brahman. But really all this is only the glory of God manifested in the world. It should be known that energy assumes various forms such as earth, water, light, air, and ether, at the command of that one who is the master of the gunas, the maker of time, who is omniscient, who is pure consciousness itself, and by whom all this is ever enveloped. Pretty much the summation of everything I've just said, those 2 slokas. After setting the creation in motion and withdrawing himself from it, that's the projection process and the withdrawal process, he unites the principle of spirit, Purusha, with the principle of matter, everything from Prakriti on down, using 1, 2, 3, and 8 principles through the instrumentality of time and all the inherent properties of these qualities. So basically, all of this is the inherent property of the Purusha. The kingdoms of heaven within you are actually yours. They don't belong to nature. Nature belongs to you. And when man gets disconnected from nature, that's when, of course, he runs afoul of the natural wheel of harmony, which every religion, even the indigenous religions, talk about. There's medicine wheels and the wheel that Krishna talks about in the Gita from the scriptures, and rain and food and the gods, and back to the scriptures again. All of this is a cycle that's continually flowing on, and you want the best part of the cycle, because there are other parts of that cycle inside of that wheel that are samsaric, so pulling you back into the body in ignorance and being reborn over and over again in ignorance. Buddha called that samsara. We call it Maya. And that's where these numbers become important. He doesn't mention 5 here, that is Shvetashvatara, this Rishi, but he mentions 8. And so when you talk about 8, you have threefold mind and the 5 elements. That's the old Puryastaka body of Krishna. He says, my outer nature consists of threefold mind, and that is mind, ego, and intelligence, and 5 elements. That's my outer form. So even though it's insentient, even though it's matter, even though you could call it illusory if you want, in some schools, Krishna just calls it his outer form, his changing form, Saguna Brahman. The Brahman with attributes that changes all the time. But there's a Nirguna Brahman inside of that is not changing, and in Samkhya system that would be the Purusha. And that's an unchanging, independent, indivisible soul, which is not your ego. Ego is down here. So the apparent soul is there, already fallen far below the Trinity and Om and the Buddhi. But the real true individual soul that you're seeking is back at the hub of all this creative process. And that's basically what's being seen, setting the creation in motion, withdrawing from it. He then unites the spirit of principle and matter. That's your true self doing that. You don't think of it as some god on some throne somewhere on a cloud or something. That means your true nature that is one with the Father is doing that. Because the Father can't do it, you see. Father doesn't want any part of it. It's a mess, Everything from here down begins to become very messy. And this Buddha says, attended by the 6 transformations. He actually calls them the 6 billows. In Vedanta, we call them the 6 transformations: birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. Those are that part of that cycle I was just talking about that you would rather just stay away from. Or if you had to, you would forbear it as a yogi, as a conscious soul, like a warrior would do the battle. So when Krishna mentions Puryastika body, eightfold body, that's where we get a combination of 3 and 5. So these 5s are very important, and we looked at some of them yesterday. Let me get this Mayic mechanism out here to use it in a positive way. Might start this off. We won't review this because very much because we all looked at it yesterday, those of you who are here. But to set the tone, we didn't read the quotes. Sri Ramakrishna said, yes, all is Brahman. So he's saying, even this is Brahman with attributes. But the tiger too is Brahman, but one should not run to embrace it on that account. You see, Maya exists in Brahman like poison exists in a snake. One should not study Maya, but only observe it carefully from a distance. So you study Maya, it begins to suck you in, say like physics and various secular arts and so forth. That pretty soon you see how it takes over your whole mind. Then you make your money from it, and then you have to pass it on to your children. And when you pass it on to your children, you get a line of lawyers, or a line of circuit judges, or a line of government officials, or a line of scientists, which is not a bad thing if they know the Dharma. But if they don't know the Dharma, then it leads to atomic explosions and corrupt judicial system and bad politics and so forth. If you know the Dharma, then everything is fine. So what you really want to do is not pass on your own impressions to your children if they're not dharmic. You don't want to embroil them in Maya. You want to save them from Maya. And in order to do that, you have to save yourself from Maya first. So he says, observe it carefully from a distance. That is through meditation, through study, in a peaceful place with your mind geared towards opening that third eye, so you can know the truth of the matter. Now, that's one quote. Let's read the other one. This is my own because this is a sort of a jungle I took a picture of in the background of in Hawaii, where I live. And so I said here, Maya is a jungle. Knowing that it consists greatly of sets of 5s provides an important tool, like a machete, for the seeker after freedom. So if you find yourself caught in this jungle of name, form, space, time, and karma, basically cause and effect, that's the definition Swami Vivekananda gives of Maya. It's not outright illusion, but it's the superimposition of all these things over your true nature, so much that you forget your true nature and you think these to be real. Then you can hack your way out with the machete of meditation, study, devotion, and selfless service. The 4 yogas, those are like a machete that you can use to get yourself out of that. And it'll take some people longer. It'll take some people a very short time. Vivekananda will do it, in a teenage, after he gets out of his teens. See, just all of a sudden opens up the path. And even in his teens, he's on the trail he's cutting through the collective ignorance of mankind. He's an ever-perfect soul, Nityasiddha, they called him. Ramakrishna said he was Nityasiddha, an eternally perfect soul. So when he comes and suffers here, he's acting out suffering. It's not that he doesn't feel suffering. He feels everyone's suffering. But he's always showing you the way to get out. He's not a savior. He's an exemplar, as the ancient Indian path shows you. They show you exemplars. Saviors are a last-ditch effort, your last chance. But exemplars show you how to cut yourself in the image of God, isn't it? So that's important, just to note the difference. So this machete you can use, and knowledge is one of the important machetes you might use, because this is what we're teaching here in the Jnana Yoga, aspect of Vedanta, and what Vivekananda called the swift way to Brahman. Bhakti would be like slow boat to China or to India in this. But Jnana is the sword stroke, you see, cuts right through everything quickly in one lifetime means. So if you have the acumen for it and the capacity for it and the perseverance around it, you'll begin to, as I said at the beginning of the class, use clarity and intensity to bring these realizations up out of you and forward, and slap yourself in your own face with them. See, wake yourself up like a splash of cold water. Otherwise, you go on enjoying and you go on suffering in turns. And you're probably better if you start suffering. Because suffering wakes you up more than pleasure puts you to sleep. So as we were saying about those souls that are living the great little studies of life, never knowing what suffering is or how other cultures suffer or how other people are suffering, they're not able to develop any compassion or any selflessness. Now we looked through some of these fivefold processes. Remember, before we take this apart again, the fivefold processes that is conventional, you see traditional, is here. From the five subtle elements, the five senses of perception, the five senses of action, and the five gross elements. Those are 20 of them. And so basically all you need to know is your earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then the senses that go with them, smelling, tasting, seeing, hearing, and touching and hearing. That's 10, right? Now just take those 5 and take them into your dream state. That's kind of the short way of doing it. You have 5 senses in a dream tonight, and you have 5 elements in a dream tonight, and you're playing with them there too. And time has sort of gone away, hasn't it? It's sort of been stretched. So that's what the Upanishad says. It says, takes 1, 2, 3 with 8 through the mere instrumentality of time. And their own inherent properties, you see. So time, really, India has known that that's an illusion for a long time. Illusion means it's from the mind, it's not from Brahman. Brahman doesn't have time in it. Brahman doesn't have space in it. Brahman doesn't have form in it, or name, or any other thing. In fact, most religions shy away from giving it a name. Asked Lord Buddha, is there a God? Did I say there was a God? Well, then there's no God. Did I say there was no God? Is he totally non-committal. He doesn't want to confuse the issue. You've got enough trying to work your way through something like this because you've gotten yourself into this mess. God didn't do it, and devil didn't do it, and neither of those will ever get you out of it. So this is your own projection. This is called projection of the mind stream. And some people do it marvelously, and some people do it intermediately, and some people do it ineptly, you see. Some people are good choosers, some people are okay choosers, and some are very bad choosers. In this day and age, we're seeing a lot of bad choices. A lot of people who have chosen bad parents, have chosen bad situations, have come here with a host of karmas to work out. They're putting out fires all the time. It's called kriyamani karma in our tradition. All these things that are rising up that keep you distracted from the reason you came here was to clean the slate and begin to live a divine life. So through the mere instrumentality of time and the own inherent properties of these things, you're to see your way clear of them. Remember, Indian philosophy, which includes Buddhism, don't forget, is very big on not being reborn again, especially in ignorance. I mean, that's really sort of the bottom line. So Father of Yoga concurs. He was probably influenced by Buddha quite a bit. And he says, Father of Yoga meaning at that time, the one who compiled the yoga into one 8-limbed system, Patanjali. There was much yoga going on thousands of years previous to that. But he was influenced by Lord Buddha, and he said that when the soul reaches its transcendence of all these and sees unmanifested nature inside itself, that is all nature, all form, all name, potential inside of its own self, then it wants a divorce. It wants to get out. And that's called kaivalya. That means it's almost samadhi, or you've been having a few seated samadhis, but you haven't had the unseated samadhi yet. That is the formless nirvikalpa that Vedanta talks about, that 600 years later or so Shankara brought forward after Patanjali. This nirvikalpa, it's called vikalpa, or desire, or kalpanika, imaginings in time. See, so this is what we're doing. We're imagining in time, and Maya is there, and it's giving you all the ingredients to do all the imagining you want. You can dream yourself crazy, but and there's some traditions that say, study your dreams and so forth, turn them lucid and that forth. That's fine too, but what Vedanta really wants is, as Vivekananda often said, from dreams awake, from bonds be free, know the truth. Thou art he, thou art she, thou art that Purusha, see, the self. So Vedanta really wants you to wake up from the dreams, all the projection process that's going on. So you'll have to go against the grain for that. You have to go upstream to the source, not downstream with the pleasure crafts that are flowing towards the bay you see in the sun. You're going to have to do an austerity, as we just chanted. The Atman is won by moderation, by austerity, by veracity, that we just chanted, you see. So those beings who want to get free and get enlightened reach such a place in their deepest meditations, and they see nature inside themselves, and then they say, final step, I will renounce this. And that's how they get into oneness. The hailstone falls to the ocean, and then it just hits, and it's absorption from then on. Now, some of the great souls can come out of that state of absorption and reform themselves, take on another body-mind mechanism in whatever one of those chambers of God's mansion it wants, according to who it wants to help. You see, what beings are stuck. And Buddha would have then, why he came back to help his ancestors, why he came back to help his wife and his child, you see. So, gave them the way of the Buddha, you see. So some of them will do it immediately, and some of them will do it immediately and then come back again. You know where I'm going with that. It's called a bodhisattva. In our tradition we call it jivan mukta. A jivan mukta is one who is a living liberated soul. They can take on bodies and slough them off as many times as they want without being born. That's why we often sing that beautiful sloka out of Shankara's Nirvana Shatkam. Namrichor na shanka, name jati beda, pita naiva me naiva, janma matama janmaha. So, Namrichor, I have no death. Name jati beda, because I never had a birth. Pita naiva, I have no father. Matama janma, I have no mother. Chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. And don't forget to say the word Om. So I am, earlier he says, aham nirvikalpa, oh that's later, aham nirvikalpa, I am really this nirvikalpa, this samadhi. Before he says, mano buddhyaham kara chittani naham, I'm not the aham, I'm not the ego, I'm buddhi, I'm not the buddhi, and mana, I'm not the mind. So he's already put these in order and seen through them as the projector on the screen of Prakriti, and now he knows that all these are projections, phenomena. As I chanted, Swami Sheshananda used to chant that all the time, Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam. You'll get to the Sakshi Bhutam, the witness of all phenomena. You want to be the witness of all phenomena. So that's actually what you're doing, Vedantically speaking, when you see through these 24 cosmic principles. And they're in sets of fives, as we were saying, as Sloka 3 has been telling us. See, you can watch me get all confused with all this stuff and then bring it back together, and that might help you do it. You see, if you ever get confused. I've got too many things going on all the time. This is a juggling act you're watching here. Welcome back to Vedantic Comedy Central, you see, channel, as you saw yesterday. Now, quickly, we saw there was a fivefold cosmic mind, intelligence, ego, thought, and mind, right? That's pretty much right, from Mahat down, fivefold. And then there was 5 sheaths. There's a sheath of ego, sheath of wisdom, sheath of mind, sheath of prana. Don't forget the sheath of life force, where your ancestors went into prana. That's that next level of particle. And then there's a sheath of body, anna, maya, kosha. Those are the 5 sheaths. So there's another quintuplication. Then you have, I won't go through all of these, you have the 5 pranas. Prana, udana, samana, vyana, apana, momana, mana, bopana. No. Back to Comedy Central. So you have the 5 pranas, or what Vivekananda called one prana in 5 forms. So you need to get a hold of that. That's what the yogis want you to do early on. They want you to get a hold of the prana. If you haven't, remember there are many souls who don't need asana and pranayama because they've already mastered those steps in a previous lifetime. So they'll come here with the prana already under control, and those are the ones that can work the greatest marvels for the good of other beings. So don't lump them in with the rest. But yoga says if you're a practitioner who has forgotten about these, that hearing connects with speaking, connects with audibility, connects with ether, if you don't know these connections, then you should probably look to get a hold of that prana, and that will bring back your life force. And remember, we said there's prana in the outgoing senses, so, and in food. So if your prana of your outgoing senses is fixed in the prana in the food, then you're called a bogi. You're not a yogi. See? You like boga, not yoga. You like enjoyment, and you don't want to connect. You don't want to transcend. You don't want to renounce. You don't want to be free. You may think you want to be free, but you're still very attached. Or you may think you are free, but you're very attached. So in order to get that kind of freedom, you will connect those together, and prana is the way to get to do it as far as yoga is concerned. And of course you would start breathing, because prana is in your lungs, right? It looks like the breath, but it's not the breath. It's what's causing the lungs to pump, causing the eyes to see, causing the ears to hear. And so you will grab a hold of that, and you'll find it's also causing the thoughts to aspire. And when you find that, then depression is gone for you forever. Brooding is gone for you forever. And even the thinking process begins to be of less interest to you. You're starting to think towards no thought, towards no mind, towards peace of mind, towards the peace that passes all understanding mind. That is not ordinary mind, but original mind, or Buddha mind. That's what you're starting to lean towards. And as you do, bliss increases exponentially. As things go away, bliss increases. Where rolls the stream of knowledge, truth, and the bliss that follows both. Sing high that note, Vivekananda said in one of his poems. So that's what's happening to you, and that's why you see people going into inner states, like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, for instance, going into all these different samadhis, even on a mere suggestion, like seeing a lion in the zoo or watching someone sweep. It would like be gone, you see. Just a mere suggestion. You'd find out later if you ask him why. Oh, because Durga rides the lion. As soon as I saw the lion, I thought of Divine Mother, and I was gone. You see. So other people see the lion and they go, they're either scared or they're curious. See. It's all worldliness. It's all matter. It's all objects, as if they were real. But what it signifies is forgotten. So the significance of things deeper gets put together when you start using this machete of quintuplication process. Now you have, I have to always stop and talk about prana because it's one of the missing links in Western thinking right now. And also the tanmatras, those subtle elements, are missing in our ideology. We can pretty much conceive of 5 elements and 5 senses, and maybe even with a stretch, our dream senses. But the dream elements and prana is not there for us. Even our medicine and so forth is not looking into, not just healing, but health. You see. You know what that's like, pills and symptoms and everything, but they're not looking into the fact that some beings, like they don't need food, they don't need breath, they don't need medicine, they're already healed. So what about these beings? What do they consist of? There are these yogis who are living by the fire of yoga, not by the fire in the winter in your hearth. You see, they're living by the fire of yoga. They create heat as they go around for themselves. And like a hot knife through butter, the Vivekanandas of the world strike through name, form, cause, time, and effect, and so forth, and show us the way. So prana is a very important thing. Then you've got the 5 sacrifices we looked at. Mitraha Shamno Mitraha, Sham Varunaha, Shamno Bhavat Varyama, Shamno Indra Brihaspati is what I was trying to think of. That is, salutations to the ancestors, salutations to the humans, salutations to the celestials, salutations to the gods and goddesses, and salutations to the Trinity. And salutations to Brahman, the formless. So this is a 5-tiered stepping stone again. And so you can have 5 elements, or you have 5 tattvas, or you can have 5 senses. But what about if you looked at it in terms of 5 sacrifices that I should be doing? If I just become aware that this 5-tiered stepping stone inside of me has to be propitiated, then I'm at the altar offering flowers, or I'm not just worshiping my ancestors, because then you'll go to the ancestors, as Krishna says in the Gita, but worshiping the whole many-tiered pantheon of God with form. See? And I can do it in 1 minute by chanting and offering a flower in front of the self. By the self, for the self, to the self. I can do it in 1 minute, and I've done my 5 sacrifices. Of course, you might want to flesh that out a little bit later and actually go serve. It's karma yoga. So that's a very beautiful quintuplication. And then we had things down here in the sadhana, the austerity, the 5 fires. You build 4 fires and the sun comes up and you're sitting there all day. You do an austerity. These are sadhana panchakarnas. You have the 5 states of mind, scattered, dull, sometimes balanced, sometimes not, one-pointed, and no mind, niruddha. 5 states of mind according to the father of yoga. And you could look at yourself. So now, tattvas, senses, gods and goddesses. Now how about looking at it at the level of, and sacrifices, now look at it at the level of these, your own mind, and the different moods that it gets into. Why sometimes in meditation you're dull, and then you get restless, and then you get balanced, and you go back. If you know that in meditation, then you can see your 24-hour day is built like that. And then your 12-year cycle is built like that. Your 40 days in the wilderness is built like that. And you see the dark night of the soul, or you see Mara under the bo tree, and you know that the gunas are happening. They're in cycles all the time. That is, slothfulness, restlessness, and balance are going and cycling all the time, and they're vying for competition in your own mind. And then you know what a cycle is made out of. That time gets so stretched that one day can become a yuga. A yuga can become a mahayuga. And a mahayuga may be like one breath, in-breath and out-breath of Lord Brahma, the Trinity. And time becomes so stretched out, then you're back into a timeless state. You see, it's just sort of like anything from a coma to deep sleep. But samadhi, of course, that obliterates time. You don't come back out of that in most cases, except for these special souls. So beautiful things to contemplate at the level of spiritual practice, sadhana. And then we had the 5 moods: peace, servant, parent, friend, and beloved. The devotee takes that, takes God as he wants to be the servant, he wants to be the parent, he wants to be the friend, he wants to be the lover and beloved together with God. That's called the 5 moods, or panchabhavas. Then you have here pancha yamas: non-violence, truthfulness, non-covetousness, continence, and non-giving, non-receiving, staying free of possessions. Those we went through yesterday. I think that's where we ended at the class, and I just brought those back for our reconsideration and for those of you who were not present yesterday. And then we said there are some other panchakarnas that you might want to study from a distance. You might want to involve yourself in some of these others, these practices, because no doubt practice puts you away from God, but it puts you in contact with the problems of your mind. Sadhana does not lead to God, it leads away from the world. So and away from the mind. So sadhana will not take you all the way, but it will deal with the mind so that the mind become pure of its misconceptions and its imperfections, and then the mind can become original mind again. The two just fit together nicely, you see, like 2 hands coming together. So this sadhana process is something you might want to engage in and watch it also. But from a distance, things like birth, disease, old age, decay, and death have been listed. The pancha dukkha, the 5 kinds of suffering. That is good to watch from a distance and to become aware of, because if you do, then you know the first noble truth of the Buddha. There is suffering. And you understand that. And the Buddhist scriptures say that you cannot become a Buddhist if you don't accept that. And from what I've seen, there are Buddhists out there that have not accepted that yet. They think that they can get rid of the suffering of sentient beings, but what they're really doing is getting rid of the unnecessary suffering of living beings. Everyone from ant to avatar suffers because they take a form. It's just a matter of how you deal with it. And if the form suffering becomes real, the objects become real, the disease becomes real, and so forth, the 6 billows become real, or these 5 transitions become real, then you're in a problem. You have to, with your yogic prowess, see through them, detach from them, as you would in any good step of detachment, vairagya that you take. 10 levels of vairagya in this tradition, from mild to middling to intense. Those are that's how thick, how big, how huge vairagya is, you see, in the tradition. Ignorance, attachment, nature, desire, and retribution. Avidya, linga, pramachadika, kama, karma. Those are called the panchabandhas, the 5 bondages. We have a chart on that we could actually look at maybe after the break. And then ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. Pancha kleshas, those are Patanjali's list. You can see these different lists, the 6 passions, the 8 fetters, the 5 kleshas, and the umpteen whatevers. They go on and on, all these different kinds of lists, and each sage or savior or seer or saint had one for you. And probably pretty much in alignment with the times and what they saw in the people at that time. So he would say, this is really your problem right now. At 140 AD, Patanjali probably said, the seer has become identified with the seen. We're entering into a materialistic age here. We better give them this 5 kleshas. Ignorance of your true nature, egotism, attachment and aversion. Both of those are chains that bind. And clinging to life. Those are called, the father of Vedanta looked at those and called them the 5 hells. Each one, Misra, Tandra Misra, each one more and more dark than the next. So you got to clinging to life or fear of death, and that was the lowest hell you could possibly fall into, because the very first truth is, I and my Father are one. The very first truth is, I am Brahman. Very first truth is, I am birthless and deathless. How did you fall into that all of a sudden from there to there, you see? How many ages did it take? How many avatars, visitations did it take for you to forget your true nature when that's the main thing they're showing you every time, by example, is eternal life, divine life. So that is the deepest, darkest hell if you fall into clinging to life or fear of death. Those are a quick review and a few of the samsaric panchakarnas that show themselves up, and that's just as many as I could fit in a few hours on an 8x11. But there are many more. There might be a second chart to this, number 2, with some more panchakarnas. Remember, pancha 5, karna, cause. So you're talking about the causes of things. For a person who wants to look deeper into how manifestation happens, or how expression happens, or how deception happens, how the wool gets pulled over the eyes. Now, all of that in accord with Sloka 3. In the time remaining in the first half, let's look at Sloka 4. That reality gives the start to the creation associated with the 3 gunas of nature and orders all things. Again, in the absence of the gunas, he destroys all created objects, and after destruction remains aloof in his essence. Probably better word than creation and destruction for us is going to be projection and withdrawal, because the Sanskrit language and the seers that used it had words for that, sankalpa and so forth, and pralaya, withdrawal of all things into formlessness. They have Sanskrit words that we don't have in English, so you'd probably like to say not creation and destruction, but projection and withdrawal. As you look at the world and consciousness as an ocean, and you see all the waves forming and taking on the name wave and the form wave, and then giving it up, as Vivekananda says, and doing that again and again, then you pretty much see what the ocean's telling you. It's not asking you to sail it or surf it or dive it or fish it. That's just secondary. The real thing the ocean's telling you is that there are many apparent souls forming on the surface of consciousness, and then they dissolve back in, and it's all, insentient nature, and it's unmanifested, and then it manifests itself, and then it goes into unmanifested again, and nothing ever is born and nothing ever dies when that happens. Not even nature dies. You don't die. Not even your body really dies, because you'll just take on another one, and the memory of your body or your ancestor's body or your great-grandfather's body or the body of Krishna will still remain in your mind. You can destroy the clay cup. You can't destroy the thought clay cup. So this is the eternity of everything. There's no beginning, middle, and end to it. There just seems to be. And the person in knowledge of these facts, these non-dual facts, Advaita Vedanta, becomes free, becomes the seer of all phenomena, the witness. And that might dawn on the mind in stages, no doubt, because you go back into life, and then Maya insinuates itself on you, on your situation, on your family, on your thinking process, and seeping into the cracks of your dreaming and deep sleep consciousness, unbeknownst to you, accumulating karma that has to be worked out in that lifetime. Vivekananda made that very wonderful statement. The more advanced spiritually a person is, the quicker their karma gets dispelled. And then the less advanced spiritually a person is, the longer it takes to dispel that karma. So karma has a long shelf life, that's the expression, you see. And then it comes back on you if you're an evil person, particularly. That is, if you're under an evil influence and you haven't, you've fallen victim to the evils of materialism and atheism and agnosticism, those little mouse squeaks we were talking about yesterday, when you should be roaring like a lion, I am, God is, everything is, and there's no birth and death for me. Put it in a song if you like. See, you can put it in this way, for instance, speaking about songs. Duristvam Shivastvam Shashaktistvameva Tvameva Tamata Pita Cha Tvameva Tvameva Tavidya Tvameva
sarvasya bandhu Gatir mati matir veva sarvam tvameva Kalibo Ram Krishna Kalibo Kalibo Ram Krishna Kalibo
So any stotram you want to take out of hiding in that storehouse of divine music that was the Vedas, then you can do that and sing it, make it express, make it, give it life, give it expression, just like it's the tendency of the soul to do. It's divine expression rather than just say, projection or creation, as we were saying. You can't create anything because it was already there to begin with. And you pull it out of its unmanifested state. That's the truth of appearance and disappearance, or rising and falling, the Buddhists call it. The interdependence of all things, you see. And when you see that this is connected to this, and this is connected back to this in cycles, you'll want this, you see. You'll want that which doesn't cycle. You'll want the witness of all phenomena. And that will bring that bliss. Otherwise you're just getting pleasure, or you're getting knowledge, you see. But wisdom leading to truth is what you want. So putting that together, then you will get that. Now, talking about the three gunas of nature and the absence of the gunas. So if you wanted to step back to yesterday's class, just as a quick reminder, you have this gunas, tamas, rajas, and mixed sattva and sattva, all vying for periods in cycles. We see there's an era of peace, then we see that sattva is kind of predominant in the human mind. Oh, we've all gotten rid of our craze. You see, we're not madmen anymore. We're actually trying to help each other and live in peace and so forth. And then all of a sudden, desire, attachment, disturbances, anger, jealousy, desire for objects comes, and then there's a period of rajas, and then it's a period of war, like the Kurukshetra war that Krishna and Arjuna were in. And then pretty soon tamas, nobody cares at all about anything. They're too sleepy and lazy to go to war. So it happens in huge cycles, and then it happens in one breath, inside of one breath. Just watch your breath in, held, and out, and watch your mind at the same time, and see what you think as you breathe. Watching the breath isn't all there is to Buddhist, the beginning of a Buddhist path or the Hatha Yoga. You have to actually connect it to the prana and watch the mind, because you connect it to the prana and watch the mind, and those things in your mind that you usually don't think about will all of a sudden occur to you. It's like going up to 10 or 12,000 feet, you're without oxygen, you're going to think differently. The mind is changing, body's changing climates. Well, the mind also changes climates and thinks differently. And if it wants to adapt itself to higher mental climates, then it'll see what's in the way of those happening to it. You see, those will be those disturbances, those kleshas, those sets of fives, mayically speaking, will come forward. What's my main problem? I don't have any jealousy, I don't have any greed, but I might have lust, I might have anger. So, of those six passions, which one is most predominant when things get tough? See, when I'm challenged, or when I'm seeking pleasure, just pleasure, mixed sattva instead of pure sattva. So all of those are barometers for you. They're indications, and the beautiful thing about them is it's not a moral and immoral teaching. It's not a teaching about virtue and vice. It's a teaching about the very nature of prakriti. The very nature of mind is imperfect. The only perfection is in your soul. Everything else is a mixed bag. You might have noticed. There's nothing all bad here, and there's nothing all good, Vivekananda said. But saying the world is all good is like saying hot ice. So back to my point about the first noble truth being suffering is, you have to face that off and accept it. Then the second noble truth is there's a cause for that. Well, how many systems do I have to talk about? There are many, many ways to look at the causes of things and get back to the source. Then the third noble truth is there's a way out. And Buddha has his Ashtanga Marga, the Eightfold Path, to show you that. Now, looking at this and replacing those words, he projects all things and then he withdraws them at the end of time in cycles. Let's look at let's look at it in a little bit different samkhya way, more like the way of qualities and absence of qualities. Because when the mind becomes no mind, the qualities are absent. The easiest way to look at that is your deep sleep state tonight. Just think back on your dream state, what dreams you had, and then think back and see if you can remember when your dreams went blank and you weren't awake yet. It was called a deep sleep state. And see if you can call back what you experienced in deep sleep. You'll know that it gave you deep perfection, that you felt very good in deep sleep, that you didn't have anything to worry about. But you don't know that you probably saw the light of Brahman in the deep sleep state and enjoyed it, but you didn't bring back the memory of it. Because when you came down, this curtain of nescience here became thick. You came out of deep sleep. See, here's deep sleep state. So the curtain of nescience came thicker, and you entered the visionary state, which is the higher level of dreams. And then you entered the dreaming state, which is the 1,000 imbecilities of the mind, as Nikhilananda called it. And then you entered the waking state. So your consciousness is shifting back and forth, short of the curtain of nescience, which flows off of Mother like a natural filter for souls who are not ready for formless dynamism or for formless reality, Turiya and Turiyatita. So she's a sort of a natural filter there. You could assign these to the chakras too. Waking, dreaming, and deep. Waking and dreaming are like the first three chakras, the Muladhara and to the Manipura. You see, and then you get into a deeper state. You're beginning to hit the heart chakra. You see, and then the third eye chakra, throat and third eye chakra, and finally you're into the Sahasrara. So you could, I don't think I put those on this chart, but you could assign them, generally speaking, the Kundalini Yoga system to that gift of Gaudapada, the waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and Turiya of Vedanta science, Advaita Vedanta, A, U, and M of Om, and the little Shwara up there, a little half moon with a smile, I call it. We got there through this sloka 4, through the gunas, didn't we? So here they are listed on the side. Tamas is predominant, cosmically speaking, all the way down from into gross form. Then you see tamas is really thickening. That's the curtain of nescience, thickening power. And covering power, we call it, avarani shakti. And then here at the level of the Trinity and so forth, rajas gets predominant. Rajas and the beginnings of sattva, because Lord Brahma's world is called sattvic. But anything below Lord Brahma's projection begins to become denser and denser. You can look at that through the particle theory, how everything congeals right on down into granite. You see a solid vibration, and then right on up into air or ether, which is a very, very subtle vibration. Now, as sattva becomes predominant, then you're approaching Om, there's the word, and the Mahashakti herself, who is the purveyor of Om. And causal form, this deep sleep state is there. That's why I say look into your deep sleep state and study it. In meditation, best when you do it right when you wake up. Last night I was saying, are you coming to meditation tomorrow morning? And one person said, I can't get up in the morning. Sorry, I just can't get up in the morning. So I just smiled. But at some point that will be necessary, because you're going to want to study your dreams and your waking, your deep sleep state, and that goes away during the day. Too many things come crowding back on it and you'll forget it. Even a very powerful dream at the visionary state will get forgotten and begin to fall apart over time. Something that really impressed you, something you saw that was very powerful or very helpful to your spiritual growth will begin to deteriorate and fall apart like everything else. Especially if you tell it to someone who doesn't understand, then it fall apart quicker. So they say only tell it to your guru and share it, and then you can find out what the real meaning of it is and hold on to it and meditate on it. So you hold on to those things which are important and you let go of those things that are not important. What's the problem here? We hold on to the things that aren't important and we let go of the most important things. Is that human nature? If it is, then I want out of it. And I want divine nature, because Lord Brahma remembers everything sattvic. Lord Vishnu preserves everything sattvic. And Shiva will come along and destroy everything, tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic. He's impartial. See, the God of wisdom will cut it out of you if you have to wait that long. So if you go where sattva is predominant, you're going to have to deal with this curtain of nescience, but you can get through it by pure intelligence. Now, these three lines are very important. This is the Brahma Granthi, and this is the Vishnu Granthi, and this is the Rudra Granthi. They're like subtle membranes, like you would have some sort of a block in your nerves or in your vessels, and the blood or the energy cannot pass through. So in that same way, the mind has these subtle membranes, and you can't get beyond them. The humans and ancestors cannot get beyond this. See, they bounce back off of it. It's like an elastic membrane, and they come back to rebirth all the time. But the intrepid soul will penetrate through the Brahma Granthi, which is basically these three lower chakras, and get to the heart. You see, that's with a very pointed intellect one does that. There's that sloka that says, Danur grihit vau upanishadam mahastram sharam hupasanashita sanjayita layamya tad bhavakatena chetasa. Intelligence. Laksham yoga, point at the target, you see. Laksham tadevaksharam somya, get that amrit, vidya, wisdom. So you take as a bow, as a weapon, that truth that you're learning from the Upanishads. You fasten your mind to it after you've sharpened it by thoughts on reality alone. Then you point it at the mark, you release, and you penetrate it and reach the imperishable Brahman. See? So that's what you're going to have to do to penetrate through these granthis, knots. Granthi means knot in Sanskrit. But these are mental knots, and this is what's pretty much keeping you from keeping you where you are, keeping you from growing, spiritually speaking. And the sensitive spiritual aspirant can feel that, can feel it being held down. It's like a balloon blown up in this room, and you can't get into the room even though the room's empty. So you keep coming against this elastic covering. So you have to deflate that. That's usually a metaphor for the ego. But pretty much what we're saying here, the egos of the ancestors who are holding how many 7 billion in the world now? So the ancestors, how many billions of those are holding the ancestor realm in the pranakasha? See, so they're holding a space, and it's surrounded by this sort of elastic membrane, and they can't get through it. We may be playing to the ancestors in Japan and in India and so forth, but the ancestors, who are they praying to get out of heaven? They're praying to the celestials. They want a higher heaven. And occasionally, a celestial will come down to earth and show itself to you. That's a subtle body it's showing. It's not an actual physical body. It's a thought body that the angel is showing to you, a form, and then it'll disappear. That's how it comes so easily and passes so easily. Or a vision of a great sage in the dreaming state. You have some dream of a hoary bearded fellow, with a staff, showing you your direction. You wake up later and forget it, usually. But whatever the case may be, these are appearances of the subtle body in the physical level, which is how you explain Christ walking on water and, rising from the dead, so-called, and all that. It's a projection of the causal body into the subtle, and the physical. Some beings in the physical can see it. They can actually see it because their eye has been made more single than others. They've become more sensitive, like Ramakrishna seeing a lion, you see, and he goes a different direction with it than we do. So he's prepared his way. I shall come and prepare the way, John the Baptist said. And so did others say that. The Bab in Baha'u'llah's case. And there are many beings who came to prepare the way for people to see the great truth. Now back to the membranes. This one is between, keeping you in the cycle that Buddha wanted out of. Insects, humans, animals, ancestors, revolving all the time. But this one is keeping you below, into the deep sleep state in the causal form, is right there. You can't get beyond the heart chakra or into the third eye region. You're running a boat race, Sri Ramakrishna said, between these, and you're getting glimpses of higher things, but you're falling back from them, not able to hold them. So that's where the advanced spiritual aspirant is storming the gates of enlightenment and falling back. And he doesn't want to develop a habit of failure. So he has to be very careful at that level of sadhana with the mind, not to get disappointed or put off, to keep the teacher, to keep the scriptures, and to make informed and educated forays into the realm of formlessness, with techniques like studying your dream sleep, deep sleep state and so forth. Now, that's another, it's called Vishnu Granthi. And then here is a Granthi that's exceptionally difficult to penetrate. That's getting from the third eye, I'm using Kundalini system to explain it, to the Sahasrara chakra. There's a subtle membrane there that the visionary, the knower of truth, somehow just cannot yet give up the subtlest tendrils of ego and form and get to the Sahasrara, which is 1,000-petaled lotus. See, this is 2-petaled. This is 1,000-petaled. So 2-petaled means coming out and going in, 2 lands, 2 directions. And when you're coming out, you're falling down to various chambers in God's mansion, the whole thing being God's mansion. And then when you're going back in, you're working your way up to Om. So that's why the mystics hear the sound. Starting right there, some of them even say it originates in the navel. That's not true. Specifically, they hear it at the most subtle part of that chakra, but it really emanates from higher centers. And this center is actually called Anahata. That means Om. Anahata chakra. That's another word for the primal word. That was in the beginning and it was God. So this is a very, very subtle barrier. So as we take apart this fourth sloka, talking about how it projects and it sustains and then it withdraws, that's all the work of the Trinity. Every good philosophical system has a Trinity and should be able to explain it to you, the functions of the Trinity. And it's all under the auspice of this dynamism, formless dynamism we call Shakti, or the wisdom mother. Sri Ramakrishna worshipped her as Mother Kali. And then beyond that, even up into her very highest regions, you leave the realm of Saguna Brahman and you enter the realm of Nirguna Brahman. That is, Brahman with attributes and Brahman without attributes. And as you get deeper and deeper, or further out into Saguna Brahman, things become very dense. And as you get further inward towards Nirguna Brahmans, things become very subtle. And that's what we'll talk about more in Sloka 5 and 6 and when we come back from our break. Thank you. Mahalo. And namaste. We'll see you in 10 or 15 minutes. The live streaming audience can look at this in the meantime. right. We are back. It's the second half of our Sunday class here at SRV Oregon. Another hour to sit in the warmth of the Jnana Yoga tradition in Vedanta and in other traditions too. Remember, this is a wide Catholic sweep, all-pervasive sweep of wisdom in India. Not just one prophet and one book, but hundreds and dozens of each that go back for millennia BC and that have come to us relatively uninterpolated, uncorrupted in the Upanishads, the Gita, and the Brahma Sutras, in such a pure form that it's as if no time had passed at all. We were still sitting here amongst the rishis, and they are in us and applauding and agreeing with and consenting with everything that is being taught here, which is the richness of their own tradition, their own original thought process. That sankalpa that they engaged in, which was lila, divine sport, rather than mayic sankalpa, projecting into ignorance via ignorance and ending up in ignorance. They live in Brahman all the time. They speak Brahman, and they return to Brahman, all knowing that, as Vivekananda said, coming and going is all nonsense. So if we talk about a cosmological process like this chart we ended up with at the end of the first half, then we're talking about nonsense in a way. We're talking about a projection, a dream projection that never really actually happens at all the way down to the very events of our life and the appearance of objects, all empty, as the Buddhists would say. Empty of what? Empty of substance, empty of the ability to fulfill you, empty of desire, empty of name and form, ultimately, empty of suffering. Those are the kinds of emptinesses that we need to focus on, not empty of essence. And of course it has an essence, and Buddha would be the first one to agree with. He called it Tathagata or Pragya Param, the supreme intelligence. That's what he named himself after. Why would he name himself after something like that and then say it's all an illusion? The emptiness we're looking at is to get back to that essence, the divine essence that's at the foundation of everything. As Vivekananda said, the silverness of silver, the goldness of gold, the manliness of man and the womanliness of woman, that I can give you. I don't have riches. He's a sannyasin without any possessions or money, but that I can give you, that essence, if you will open up your heart and your mind and put those two together and reach the goal of human existence swiftly and directly, as the Vedanta wants you to do, that sword stroke cut. The same thing that Tantra wants you to do, same thing Yoga wants you to do, same thing Buddhism and Jainism and other Nastika, non-orthodox systems want you to do in India. They're all in agreement about that, and about so many of the non-dual axioms. That's India, called Bharata, the eternal land, before it was even called India, before those who lived along the Indus River were called Hindus. So when we talk about a process, yes, ultimately unreal. It's all a play, a sport, a dream. Row, row, row your boat in it, and do so knowing it to be a dream. Or as one song in India says, "O dreamer, awake, you must. Stay the same, stay in your own divine nature," just like Vivekananda has done even when he's amongst us. There are even songs about it.
Harindras chestitai kalagyogayanai parigyanayar buddho maharshi darshanai yatrindro shakti bir bhavanyam nasti king Vivekananda te prabhate pranjali Narendra shashave Narendra yovane Narendra hakridane Narendra shikshane Narendra palane Narendra yarpane Vivekananda te prabhate pranjali.
O Narendra, Vivekananda, king of men and savior of the fallen, you remain unchanged, whether as a child, a youth, or a full-grown man. Whether sporting in Divine Mother's Leela or immersed in serious study, you remain ever aware of the stainless self. Absorbing the transgressions of the world and protecting the inhabitants, leave no blemish upon thee, O Great One. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, we offer our heartfelt salutations. Oh, one of some 10 or 11 verses on Swamiji, written by one of his, one of the Swamis of this generation of Swamis in the Ramakrishna order, looking back on that great soul and his advent on earth. So it remains the same. And there's other verses that evince that kind of sentiment, or truth sentiment, too. Which I may have to look up for you and sing about in another class. The idea being this principle we were talking about yesterday that he's so attracted to, samadarshitvam, same-sidedness, equality in all beings, or samasta chitta, sometimes it's called, universal mind. Those are principles whose time has come. And not just a tolerance between religions and nations, but actually an understanding of what each one holds as a facet of the diamond of Brahman, or Allah, or Almighty Father. Or if you'd rather, just the unity of all religions. The natural synthesis, sahaja tantra siddhanta, the natural conclusion of everything that Tantra talks about. So all these systems are in agreement about that, the main axioms of aparinama and ajativada, no birth, no death for the soul, and no transformation for the soul. You put it in just two pregnant Sanskrit words like that, and walk away from that 10-second teaching, all of a sudden remand and with your weapons intact again, and sure of yourself, like lighting your torch and keeping it lit. So it must be mentioned that Maya makes the impossible possible. Somehow this nameless, formless reality springs into name and form, takes on those attributes from nirguna to saguna, and then it gives them up. We just make sure not to get hypnotized by the process, from life to life, from age to age, from waking to deep sleep, into dreaming and back again, from breath to breath, from meditation to meditation, and remain aware of the changeless equality in all things. Samadarshitvam. Darshitvam means to see, to clearly see, darshan. Not just going and seeing some popular person somewhere on a throne, but to actually see through the impositions and false superimpositions of Maya, and see your true nature at all times, in all places, and know with an assurance that that alone exists. That alone exists. Thou art that, and that alone exists. Those are the Advaitic kernels in that core religion of non-duality, which is India's special gift to humanity. This I say, remember, pray, that God is true, all else is nothing. The real me is none but He, and never, never matter changing. As he wrote to one of his students in a letter in England, you see. So, the real me is none but He, is Nirguna Brahman, never, never matter changing. But if you don't know these steps, then when you're so far flung out here in the realm of wood and metal and water and air and land and earth, and you don't know the meaning of ether, even the scientists stand back puzzled by ether, then you need a way to get back. You need to connect the dots. You need to follow the trail of breadcrumbs. And if they've been pecked away by the little birds of forgetfulness, it's not going to be easy. If your culture has either lost or never had, and you probably know what I mean by that, a cosmology, and has to borrow from somewhere else, and the soul has to retrace itself through these other ideologies, then by all means go and do it. Because as we said yesterday, there's no such thing as a foreign religion, and all religion is
indigenous to the soul.
indigenous to your soul. Yeah, you throw away that fear, get rid of that fear, and bring the Muslim and the Christian together. It was Abraham, it was Moses, it was Jesus, and then it was Muhammad. There's no break in that line. Those are one religion, and that's only in the Middle Eastern way of thinking. In the Far Eastern way of thinking, you've got India and China and all the way up to now Zen in Japan. That's all one religion. Vedanta and Buddhism, the same thing. Natural to have different words, different languages in different times, and certain facets accented more than others. But that doesn't take away the equality of everything, not just the soul, but of the religion, not just a religion, but of nature and the soul. And that's just something that you recall if you've lost it and get back on the track. It's that simple. Avidya, ignorance, is your main problem. See? First, you're not in recognition of yourself, and all study of names and numbers and facts and secular knowledge and intellectual knowledge and science will not restore that to you, because it's studying on one thing, matter, materialism. Utopian society, things that are impossible. Maya makes them impossible, you see. But the possible can also become possible. You can read into Maya, use Maya, name and form and time and space to point, like a trail of breadcrumbs, back inside to the source of things. Return to the source. Now, in order to warm us up again to the subject, let's take these quotes on this chart we were studying. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the ideal of this center, said, "Do you know what God with form is like? Like bubbles rising on an expanse of water, various divine forms are seen to rise out of the great akasha of consciousness." Key word there, ether, akasha. The incarnation of God is one of these great forms. The primal Shakti sports through the incarnation. So here is the primal Shakti, and she sports through the avatar, you see, the great souls. Now, this quote in the middle is very beautiful too. From this Upanishad that we've been studying, see if you recognize it. Higher than the personal God is the infinite supreme being, who is concealed in all beings according to their bodies, and who, though remaining single, envelops the whole universe. Knowing that to be the Lord, one becomes immortal. So that is out of one of the recent chapters that we not only see that there's oneness there, but we see that it has an apparent two-ness. That is Brahman and Shakti, or you could say creature and creator, or nature and spirit, or God and mankind. However you put it, there's this innate oneness and then an appearance of two. And isn't that what we were just reading? He unites the soul, the principle of spirit, with the principle of matter, with one, with two, with three, and with eight, through the mere instrumentality of time. So you can see how everything burgeons out of that, unified, and takes on the overlays of the facade of manyness, diversity, and comes back to one. You could probably add in there that when they say two, they really mean Brahman and Shakti. Sri Ramakrishna said, like fire in its power to burn, or like water in its wetness, Brahman, the formless reality, and Shakti, its dynamism, or like a snake in its wriggling motion. Sometimes it's still, other times it wriggles, so that same twofold power is there in that one formless reality. A very wonderful way in which Advaita Vedanta talks to us about it. Now, before we leave this chart, we can also draw another distinction between a pair of twos that are one. That's jnana and bhakti. So these two quotes reflect that. About the jnani, who tends to concentrate more towards the formless, he says, The Jnani, through his discrimination, realizes that the ego and the universe are both illusory, and perceives Brahman in his own consciousness. So, not so much into ritual, not so much into form, really wants to open that single eye of unity of vision and see the truth and be set free. That's why we called jnana the sword stroke. You should be able to realize and remember the truth in one lifetime or less. Vivekananda says 6 months. But for people who have been raised in materialism and not given the Dharma, it might take a little longer. As I say, that's where the importance of other lifetimes comes from, because you're not going to find it in this lifetime unless you are one of those very rare Westerners who had had Dharmic parents. Like one of the Swamis of the Ramakrishna order had come here and one of his students had taught, and then you learned from one of his students, or your father or grandfather learned from one of his students. We ran into someone the other night at a restaurant like that. Yeah, my father was a monk of the Ramakrishna order. I said, but you're standing here. How could he be a monk? You see? Monks don't have children. Oh, well, he didn't stay a monk. Well, that's straw and fire, in a sense. That's the Westerner not sticking to anything. But there's also good reason for that. There's a seed planted where people will take to a certain thing for a while and begin to develop a samskara, a mental impression around it. And then that person in his next lifetime will remember by seeing a monk that he was once a monk. And there's a connection to be made there. All of a sudden you're connecting on back through the process right to the formless Brahman. Like people seeing a picture of Swami Vivekananda in the 1890s in the streets of Chicago or New York on a poster, the Hindu monk. We even have pictures of that poster that was put out. And then all of a sudden having a deep realization of Vedanta without being able to put a word to it by seeing a picture. So that's happened to people even in this day and age, that these memories are perked by things long past and they can't be traced back to one lifetime. As I've often said, Freud and Jung, they never had a Hindu person on their counseling table, on their couch. So they never heard of many lifetimes. The soul, if they had had a Chinese Buddhist or a Japanese Zen or a Hindu Vedantist on their couch, they would have said, Mr. Jung, you're speaking about only one lifetime, but I've had many lifetimes. Which is what Krishna told Arjuna in the Gita. I've had many lifetimes, Arjuna, and I know them all, but you haven't discovered that yet. Arjuna is still just a warrior. You see, a warrior of great prowess, and he's come upon fear in the form of an army opposite him that has some of his friends and relatives in it. Doesn't want to kill. A warrior who doesn't want to win the day. You see, it's very contradictory. So Krishna gives him the teaching of the birthlessness and deathlessness of the soul and the appearance of bodies and what they're made of and so forth. So as we look at all of these charts through the instrument of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, we come upon the importance of numbers in Vedanta. Numerology, that's just mere numerology. But the numbers of the cosmic principles, the quintuplication process, the diluting pairs of opposites that Krishna mentions in the Gita, dvandva mohena, these twos give you problem, virtue, vice, pleasure, pain, life and death. Those will put you off the path if you're not careful. And also the threes, the triputis, all these beautiful wisdom teachings that give you a back door out of the dualities, all the way up to the 8s and the 24s. All of a sudden numbers are not just something to be playing with, but they're actually pointing to the very nature of the manifestation process. And that will then point to, in turn, the dissolution of the manifested process. You see, everything back into the unmanifested. And all of a sudden you have the figure 8, and you have the circle, and you have the trikona with the triangle. You have all these things that are played with in mathematics and played with in astronomy and played with in astrology and played with in chemistry, and all of a sudden they have all this meaning and they connect to each other. They don't just stop at death, but they deny death. So Ram Prasad sings, I have received a command from the Divine Mother of the universe that death must die. I will now put death in its own grave, and I will stand up and declare my immortal nature. So if you're writing a song about that, a mere song, you see, then what about the scriptures that declare it beyond a song? The actual testament of the seers are the scriptures. So that becomes dependent upon you to look into them, see, and find out what they say, the truth of the scriptures, the truth of the seers, and then get your own direct spiritual experience around it. That's Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhava. That's a Triputi, another one of those threes, you see. They come rolling out of the process all the time, like the three gunas. And like the fives, all these fives we're looking at. So numerology all of a sudden has a great power. Now, that's as far as the Jnani is concerned. Realizes that everything in the universe is really illusory, means that these cycles that go on and are changing all the time, so he's losing interest in recycling. Now he wants what is eternal, what is true, what is real, what is beneficial. And so he moves towards it. The Bhakti goes to the same reality through a different method. He says here, the Bhakta, that's the devotee, the one who feels love and compassion and so forth. The Bhakta feels that God is one entity and the world is another. So the Bhakta is operating under a sense of duality that's a very beneficial duality. We talk about dualism sometimes. We talk about, religion and science at loggerheads. You're talking about a very strange duality that's going on there. It's not like in duality in India, you don't disbelieve in reality, that there is no God. It's that you do believe there's a God, but you just think you're separate from it. So all of a sudden you've got a different grade of duality going on in India. Never disbelieved in existence. Existence exists. Otherwise the word existence wouldn't mean what it is, you see, what it does. But you're just thinking that there's a line of demarcation between I and that, or I and thou. The Jnani wants to dissolve that, and Christ did that. He was a great bhakta, he was a great compassion, great heart, but he dissolved the line of demarcation between I and thou and said, I and my Father are one. So he reached from, or showed us how to reach from dualism to qualified non-dualism to non-dualism. When he was speaking to people that were still there in the dualistic level, he'd say, pray to your Father in heaven. So he would not deny the kingdoms of heaven inside and your apparent separation from them. But when he was speaking to people who were attracted to him, he said, look at me as the vine and you be the branches. See, so that's qualified non-dualism. I have a connection to the one through the Son. You get to the Father through the Son. But when he's talking about those beings who walk up to him and said, we're the same souls, that I and my Father are one, he would tell them that, like his 12 apostles. Who do you say that I am? You are the Lord. You are one with Brahman. And that's what we would say later. Ramakrishna asked the same thing of his devotees. Girish, who do you think I am? You see, there's this one Rama and Krishna is now here in this Ramakrishna form, and Girish said, "You're the incarnation of God in this age." So Sri Ramakrishna said, "Well, I don't know anything about that." Wouldn't take it to the ego. Now, this chart is very deep. We can go deeper and deeper into it, but we've just seen the difference between jnana and bhakti, if there is a difference. They're the two wings of the bird, according to my teacher, that the bird goes into flight via. So, only to say that as we are looking at the 24 cosmic principles, you see the sets of fives here again. Hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, smelling, speaking, acting, moving, procreating, and excreting. And then the subtle forms of those: audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor, which are called the subtle tanmatras, and ether, air, fire, water, and earth. So all put in a nice little list there, about as far flung from formless reality as you can get. If you had a star map with that arrow pointing to one of the planets, you are here, then you could put an arrow right there and say, Well, at least apparently speaking, you are there. You are there in the 5 elements with the body, and you're working with the mind, and you probably know a little bit about the collective mind, and you probably should start finding out about the cosmic mind, because that's where all these principles begin. At Om, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So the Word goes 3 ways: down, itself, and in, you see. At first it seems separate, then it's one. And when it seems separate, it gives rise to this vibration in levels, particles that vibrate at different rates of speed. And that's what creates the kingdoms of heaven. Vibration is taken back to the source, like a bell sound back into the bell. So that's, you can ring it again and again, but it always returns to its own source. So again, knowing that distinction, that's called viveka, discrimination between what is real and what is unreal, or what is essential and what's non-essential, might be a better way of saying it. Now, that is all in accord with Sloka 4, 1s, 2s, 3s, and 8s. Sloka 3. Sloka 4 we read, that was about the gunas of nature and how the projection process works through the projection, sustenance, and withdrawal. That's the work of the Trinity. Now, if you look at further into the chapter, Sloka 5, we get that meditation sloka. Adihi sa sam yoga nimitta hetu. Remember that? That we memorized at one retreat recently. That means by previously meditating as seated in one's own heart on that absolute Brahman, the true source of all creatures, that one can be perceived as the primeval cause of the union of spirit and matter, as well as the partless entity transcending the 3 divisions of time. So now they bring in not just the mere instrumentality of time, but the 3 divisions of time. There's the knower of that, Shiva. He knows about past, present, and future, so he's called Trikaladarshi, the knower of the 3 phases of time. And the most important teaching about that is he knows that the 3 phases of time are illusory, that there's really one eternal moment out of which past, present, and future are always rising and falling. And doesn't get flummoxed then by the passage of long cycles of time, get hypnotized, get enchanted, as Eddington and James Jeans said. They were great scientists in the late 1800s. They said the other scientists have all gotten enchanted by this spread of space and time, but it behooves science more to keep its non-dual stance, keep its singular stance, and look into these things and find the causes for these effects, and the causes that will go beyond physical matter especially. Of course, then you couldn't call it physics anymore. You'd have to call it metaphysics, or you'd have to begin to look into what spirituality is trying to teach you through the scriptures. And there's some nice panchakarnas in the way of that. There's some nice blocks and obstacles in the way of that. If you make your paycheck on a thing, if you have a false ideation or hope for it, then it's going to impede you from looking deeper. So the unattached beings, the Ramakrishna Paramahamsas, the Swami Vivekanandas, the Ramana Maharshis, the Shankaras, the Gaudapadas, the Buddhas, the Christs, the Krishnas, the Ramas, the Vashishtas, they're not attached to anything. So they alone know what's beyond matter, what's beyond death. And the others are impeded by their own qualities, by their own attributes, by the mind and intellect process. And they can't get beyond thinking into non-thinking, beyond duality into non-duality, to find the true essence of something. So by meditating as seated in one's own heart, one comes to know that divine being that's seated in the heart. And that's Sloka 5, and you might want to meditate the Sanskrit on that. You will not find the Sanskrit in Jagishananda's version, transliterated Sanskrit that is. You're going to have to look at Lokeshwarananda's version because he has the transliterated Sanskrit. That if you don't know the Sanskrit Devanagari and all that, then you can actually meditate on it and memorize it in English. Let's take another sloka, because this is pretty much repeating about the unification of spirit and matter. There's a force that brings those two together, like that on the shelf. Want to hand me that? We must remember that when this is how we teach the children, that spirit and matter don't mix. Yet there's a force that's bringing them together. So, like oil and water do not mix. For about 45 seconds, you'll see that they mix. And so that's not a very good scientist, either physicist or yogi scientist. Yoga psychology, if you make a premature assumption about a thing, you have to watch it for a while, and you'll see that oil and water don't mix. It means that spirit and matter do not ultimately mix. Spirit is spirit, matter is matter. One's sentient, the other's insentient. So separate the two as early as you can, so that you won't fall into death thinking that you are death, or that you are matter, that you are the body. Know yourself always to be the spirit that is free and independent of all form. Name, form, time, space, and cause and effect. That's Maya, and it's foisting itself upon the mind in an insentient way. It's not a devil out to get you, it's just the nature of a thing. A thing, a form, a world, a body, a concept. There are objects that are subtle, and there are objects that are gross, and everything in between, until everything goes into abeyance in unmanifested prakriti, its formless nature. But that's not its formless essence yet. Brahman is that. So if you watch and see the separation of matter and spirit, of water and oil, then you'll know the two don't mix, that they only mix for a while. You see, and that's Maya, foisting the appearance of a thing upon you. Watch it long enough, as we said, study it from a distance, not get into it and mix yourself with it, but study it from a distance like any good scientist would, as from a witness standpoint, and draw your conclusions. Those are called scriptures then after that, truths of your particular psychology or ideology. And you can live by those. And if you find them change, then you have to adapt to them. If Saturn's rings look one way to you in the 70s, and look another way to you in the 90s, then you have to rewrite the book, you see. But these truths never changed through thousands of years, through all the seers. They saw them with their consciousness, not with instruments. And they saw them beyond time and space, not inside of time and space. They saw them from both sides now. And then they made the conclusion that I and my Father are one. I am not nature. I am not insentiency. And I am that. Or I and my Father are one. Or aham brahmasmi. And that was the pole around which they revolved, around which this whole process of manifestation evolves. Now you have your stable center, you see. And you can go anywhere without being born, without moving. Shiva's stable. He knows the three phases of time. So he stays in one place. Lord Brahma has a big lotus that comes out of Vishnu's navel, flowers into 1,000-petaled lotus, and it opens and he sits in the middle, and each petal is a world in space and time, a different kingdom of heaven. And he can see them all without moving. See? So this stationary principle is Atman, we call it in Vedanta, or Buddha nature, or Pragyaparam in Buddhism, or Allah in Muslim religion, or Satori in Zen. You have different names assigned to both the beings who have realized it and the principle itself. The one who is experiencing samadhi and the one and samadhi itself. See, those two are one. When you realize then that matter is different from spirit, you'll want to separate yourself from matter. It would probably be good to do that in your daily meditations. Vivekananda's version of that is just say, I'm not the body, I live without the body. Then put the body away. What am I next? I am the breath. Then put the breath away. What am I next? What the breath leads to, the thought process, mind. I'm not that either. What's that lead to? Intelligence. Now I am the light of intelligence. See, what's that lead to? That's a light shining off of a moon rather than a sun. See, I want something that shines by its own light, and then I find my true nature. And I've dissolved everything back in that in 10 or 15-minute meditation, and then I just come out again by the wax apple of that meditation process. Then later you can begin to do it in earnest. You first have to know it. See, knowledge destroys doubt or ignorance. It's the best purifier. Once doubt and fear are destroyed by knowledge, then you are free. You just don't quite know it yet. Your mind has to catch up with the fact. Because faster than sound is light, and faster than light is thought. See, fastest of all is that thing which doesn't need to run. It's everywhere already. It outstrips all that run. It's higher than the highest, lower than the lowest, faster than the fastest, and slower than the slowest, as the Upanishads state. So that one am I am that one, there can be no other, as the Hasta Amalaka Stotram says. A couple people in this room have that memorized, all verses of it. And run it through their mind in every meditation. See, eventually you're done with meditating on earth, air, fire, water, ether, tasting, hearing, touching, smelling, seeing, everything all the way up to the Trinity. You're done meditating on it. You've known it. So you meditate on Om, see, or you meditate on these Advaitic truths that's in the stotrams, that's in the songs, and you pass your time contentedly. Take the external and the internal, render them into one state, then meditate on that state and pass your time contentedly. That's how Shankara puts it in 700 AD, in the Advaita Vedanta teachings, in the Viveka Chudamani to be precise. Now, the next sloka then, 6, knowing him who is the origin and dissolution of the universe, the source of all virtue, the destroyer of all sin, the master of all good qualities, the immortal, and the abode of the universe as seated in one's own self, he is perceived as different from and transcending the tree of samsara as well as time and form. Just a quick look at the tree of samsara in case you have any doubt about what that is. And this is, of course, Shankara commented on these Upanishads, about 10 of them, and in that commentary he would bring out the facets of the tree of samsara that the Upanishads had mentioned, so you'd know more of what it is. And so we've seen it before. It's a quick study. But he does say, neither by weapons, by scripture, by fire, by water, nor by millions of different kinds of works can this tree of samsara be hewn down, but only by discrimination leading to the knowledge of the self. So he's a Gyani. Let's see. He's a Bhakti inside, but a Gyani outside, you might say. Sort of like Swami Vivekananda. Whereas Ramakrishna is more like a Bhakti outside and a Gyani inside. See? So there are ways of merging these two paths. A higher understanding, deeper realization. So when he says here that Brahman cannot be realized by, and in other verses he says by hundreds and thousands of asanas or breathing exercises or by progeny or by money, none of that will help you realize Brahman. You cannot get to the infinite through the finite. You have to realize the infinite as it is, pure and perfect, ever free, never bound. And then, if you must, work your way through the levels of matter, thought, sound, that is Om, and merge yourself into that reality. Have the actual experience of doing that, as the Upanishad says, in meditation, as directed by the scriptures, the traditional way of following the truth. The hound of heaven. Be the hound of heaven. And find that truth inside of you. If you want a brief summary or description of the tree of samsara, there it is from top to bottom. Body, is its roots, thinking yourself to be the body. Prana, that is life force, is its trunk. Objects, its flowers, sense objects. Pain is its fruit. Attachment is its twigs. The senses are its branches. And the human soul is the bird sitting in that tree. Now, if we wanted to follow or go back to one of the early Upanishads, we'd put another bird up here, wouldn't we? Because the lower bird is always eating fruits that are sometimes sweet, sometimes sour, sometimes rotten, sometimes ripe. And they're both sitting in the same tree, and the sun is shining on both of them, but the upper bird is not moving. It's just sitting in the sun in perfect bliss without sampling the dualities of the tree. So pretty soon that bird will want to join its mate, its partner, and it will become one and sit in the sunshine of non-dual reality, Advaita Vedanta. And so I don't even need to read the two quotes there because we already covered it. It's basically a really quick view of the tree of samsara as it appears in sloka 145 of the Vivekachudamani. And it's mentioned here in sloka 6, chapter 6 of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, 66. Everything 66 is like of the devil, so it's like of Mara, it's of Maya, it's of illusion. So those things call our attention to the carefulness we must utilize in transcending Maya. 6 slokas, yes, 6 chapters too. We'll meet again for Sri Ramakrishna's birthday in February and have classes, maybe finish up this Upanishad or come close to it. But I said this morning that we would probably be revolving around chapters 1 through 8. So let's take 7. May we realize him, the transcendent, the adorable master of the universe, who is the supreme Lord over all the lords, the supreme God above all gods, and the supreme ruler over all rulers. The commentary, I very rarely refer to the commentaries here, but I will in this case. It's pretty nice. He says, worship of the deity is the necessary preliminary step for realizing him, both as the personal God with attributes and as the impersonal absolute. The necessary mental fitness for wisdom or realization of the absolute and the identity of the self with it is born of loving worship and contemplation of the personal deity. So that's Vivekananda says, love first, devotion first, and then wisdom will start to dawn on you. So love of God is the foundation for everything, that bhakta. Love of personal God particularly, most beings will proceed that way. But they will qualify themselves for not just salvation, but for liberation by doing that. That's a deeper secret. The commentator goes on by saying, according to many great authorities, including Sri Ramakrishna and the Bhagavad Gita, this very realization is bestowed on the devotee who wants it by the God out of love of his infinite grace. In the words of Sri Ramakrishna, this monistic realization is like a master placing a faithful and beloved servant of his on his own seat of authority and calling him his very own self. So sometimes the master is served by the servant, you see, and then one day the master, who knows that they're really the same being, says, why don't you sit here in my seat for a while? I'll serve you. And the servant goes, oh no, I couldn't think of it. No, I insist, sit here. We're the same being. So in that way, Sri Ramakrishna uses a very simple and classic story to illustrate the oneness of God and the soul. Not innate two-ness, innate oneness, and it appears as two. So we don't turn those around. So referring to this beautiful teaching on the impersonal, and to quote further, the necessary mental fitness for jnana, or realization of the absolute, and the identity of the self with it is born of loving worship. So most beings, they went to Sri Ramakrishna in the 1800s at the Dakaneshwar Kali temple in Calcutta, Kaligata, the city of Kali. And they would ask, what is the way, sir? Because India had come a long ways, you see, into the 1800s. And English were there with materialism, and Christians were there trying to convert, which Vedanta never does. It only just reveals the truth where you are. So all of these things were impeding on India, and this was some time before Gandhi was on the scene. So there was this happening, you see, and the typical man of the day, the Bengali man, would come and say, "Sir, what is the way? I'm confused now." And Sri Ramakrishna would say, "Yearn for God." So that means that devotion for the personal deity has to be recaptured. See, people somehow think, and probably fundamentalist religion is partly responsible for it, that ritual and deities and so forth are not their way, and they're worthless, they're useless, they take you away from the true goal. But Sri Sharda Devi said, how can you say that about ritual? Thousands of people have been getting free through ritual for countless aeons. So she brings back this idea that if ritual is done in a non-dualistic way, if dualism is in a non-dualistic way is practiced, then that will be the rejuvenation of ritualism. That will be turning the small r religion into the capital R religion again. And people will then know that all of this is a manifestation of Brahman, as we have been seeing as proof through many of these systems we've looked at for 20 years now. This is our 20th anniversary in SRV. So when you see that, then you can really appreciate the four yogas. You might say, and this isn't the way for every soul, but generally speaking, bhakti first, then jnanam, and then meditation, and then action. You'd think maybe action is first, but to do really true selfless service for God means you have to love God and all beings, God and all beings first through bhakti, and then know yourself as to be one with God, knowledge, then meditate on it and get the realization that I and my Father are one, then act. What kind of a world would it be if everyone did that, you see? All of these unnecessary sufferings would not be present. We would just have the necessary suffering to deal with. Birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. And even that could be dealt with. We could transcend it. Even while we're in the body, we could transcend it. Like a bodhisattva or a Jivan Mukta does. So the four yogas have a certain sort of order, and it starts with devotion or bhakti. There are souls, of course, that you have to realize they're already realized in previous lifetimes, so you don't apply that kind of scenario to them. And there are some beings that are partially realized in other lifetimes, and they'll come back picking up the thread of Jnana Yoga. Oh, I didn't quite realize my non-dual self yet. I don't really need ritualism, so I'll just go straight to the source and pick up the thread of my yoga. So people are at all different levels of their search. The guru should know that, first and foremost. Sri Ramakrishna said, people take off in a race on a circular track, and one gets way out in front of the others. See? And then you should look away and talk to your friend and look back, and this guy is so far out in front of her, he's become at the end of the other group, you see. So he looks like he's in last place. So you never can judge spiritual progress in that way. It always looks different and feels different and is different in the case of souls who are running that race of trying to realize their true nature. The thing we could say is that, in fact, Lord Buddha said, they asked him, how many kinds of beings are there? And he said, the awakened and the unawakened. And then somebody asked him, well, what about those who are just starting to awake? What about them? Isn't there another category of being who are actually trying to get awake? He said, yes, but they're already awake. They just don't know it yet. So that very simple division of awakened and unawakened is sort of like Krishna speaking of the division between the divine and the demoniacal in the Gita. Put in old language, it's that if you're still attached to materials and senses and everything, that's a demoniacal way of living. You're going to be of harm to others. Whether you know it or not, you're of harm to others. You're impeding others. The six passions are there in you. The 8 fetters are there in you. And the gunas are there in you. and it's all in an unripe condition, and sometimes you're helping people and sometimes you're hurting people, and sometimes when you're helping them, they're hurting them. Lord Kapila said they do acts of bad stupefaction, and then they turn around and do acts of good stupefaction. So it's not so cut and dried, you see. You can do very good acts and then really be hurting someone. Like, say, you dam up a river so your kids can swim, but downstream they're dying of thirst. And you go around thinking, oh, I helped my kids, you see. So there's this world, this field of karma is flummoxing, it's confusing. You want to go to someone like a Sri Krishna to find out about that. How to do action in inaction. How to dissolve, how to do all actions in knowledge. How to use the 4 yogas properly. How to stay out of the net of Maya as you do those things. So, Tree of Samsara is a good illustrator in that regard, and good to look into those teachings in order to clarify. That's Sloka 7 then, the master of all lords, the supreme God over all gods, the supreme ruler over all rulers. So transcends Yama, the god of death, transcends Indra, the god of the gods, and transcends even the Prajapatis, the Sapta Rishis. So those are teachers at 3 different levels. You might say the teachers at the gateway to heaven, the teachers at the gateway to the gods, Indra. Indra's jeweled net, they call it. He's got a jeweled net that keeps all the heavens in one realm, and he presides over them. And each jewel has a world in it, sort of like Lord Brahma's lotus petals. You can see and preside over all those. The gods and goddesses are not the highest goal to shoot for in Hinduism, or in Vedanta anyway, because they are under the power of Maya. They like to dominate. Their domination is usually positive, but they still have this problem of presiding over millions and millions of souls, so they have to come to earth to get rid of that. To feel samadarshitvam, the equality of all things, that I'm not higher than that I'm ruling, like the man who gets off this chair and has his servant sit there, right? So they have to get over that tendency towards domination. Now, on a much lower level, domination of the evil beings, like the rulers of nations and politicians here and so forth that fall under an evil sign, that's a much grosser kind of domination. But up in the level of the gods, it's much subtler. So you will have to pass through the realm of the gods and goddesses like Indra and salute him, and even pass through the Trinity and say, oh, that's a wonderful creation you got going there, but I'm going elevator up to my true nature. I'm going inward to realization of the formless reality. So back to this idea of levels then, it's right there in that sloka. Lord of lords, supreme God over gods, and supreme ruler over rulers. That's a triputi. You can't just read that and say done. You have to say Yama is that Lord of lords. He stands death. He stands between earth and heaven. And as a transitional God, he will let people pass here and there and restrict people from going any further than their karmas will allow them. Karma and Yama are the gods in this universe, death and cause and effect. Then, if you go deeper to the heavens and the highest heavens, Indra is going to be there. There are stories in the Itihasa of India about Indra, and how the seers would come to Indra's loka and spend time talking to Indra and then transcend Indra and so forth. Beautiful stories in the sacred scriptural mythology, if you want to call it that. We call it Itihasa in India that talk about that. And then, so that's lords, gods, and then who are the rulers? The rulers are the Sapta Rishis, the Prajapatis, the teachers of the gods. Those are actually humans. So again, back to this idea, the human is the highest of all possible beings in this whole manifested level of projection, highest of all beings, because they're not fixed in any one position for hundreds and thousands of years like the gods are. They can move inward. They can transcend their limitations. They can do it in one lifetime if they so wish. So karma and reincarnation then become great tools in your hand for a sedulous seeker. Great tools. Then we might as well take the 8th sloka, which is the last one I would want to do at this particular juncture of our classes. He has nothing to achieve for himself, nor has he any organ of action. That is, he's free of these senses. No one is seen equal or superior to him. His great power alone is described in the Vedas, to be of various kinds. And his knowledge, strength, and action are described as inherent within him. So, a whole set of slokas in a row about God, his glory, his power, and how he transcends his own glory and power too. Really pointing us to that level where most of us have started to meditate. I mean, if you had a Swami or a Rinpoche or a Roshi or any person from the East come here and you joined Buddhism or Zen or Vedanta or yoga at an early age, and you got a mantra and so forth and so on, they pretty much steered you beyond all this and said, just meditate on Ishvara. Just meditate on the highest rendering of God with form that you can possibly conceive of. And you will get into formlessness. You'll get to the Father through the Son. And use the mantra. So they're automatically sweeping you up and above the whole cosmic process. Because why? Because you Americans don't have time to do it any other way. You might have noticed we're sort of like Rome and Greece. How long is this bubble of America going to last, you see? And we'd be a little bit foolish to think that it's going to last forever, especially the signs that are coming. So Armageddon to us is just, of course, a cycle that passes and everything gets restored again. So there's no ultimate fear of it or danger in it. It's just natural. However, you are wise to stand back from it and look at it and see where are we in the cycle, because when this bubble pops, you want to be in a good place. Whether that bubble is your body or your ego or a world, a culture, a world order. You want to be in a good place, sattvic, when you're ready for that. So probably should know all the levels inside of you, plus been meditating on Ishvara on up, on Om on up, you see. So that's where you find yourself at a very privileged position in Vedanta, as if you're a Brahmin. Brahmin. You are Brahman, but you probably are at the level of a Brahmin priest. Equivalent to that in India. That's sometimes what the Swamis have told us. They say, well, we're not Brahmin priests, and we don't have the Ganges River, and so forth and so on. They say, oh no, you're equivalent to the Brahmin priest, and you have the Pacific Ocean. That's enough. Everything is sacred. Don't let that restrict you. There's equality in all of this. So find that equality, qualify yourself for it, realize it, and be free. So my point here, in accordance with Sloka 8, is that you are probably meditating at that level of Ishvara, his glories, his powers, you could say her powers and her glories too, and it's about to open up to you, formlessness. And that's why deep sleep becomes important to you, meditation becomes important to you, whereas it's not going to be important to ordinary people who have not yet awakened. There's the awakened, there's the unawakened. Don't strew pearls before swine. That's how Christ put it in a little bit more blatant way. See? So you must know that if you're taking your ranks among the awakened, that you're going to be meditating on the mantra and on the ishtam. Mantra and ishtam, the great word, seed syllable, and with its seed syllable, and the deity it connects to. In our case here, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or Sri Sharda Devi. In the case of the Buddhist, Lord Buddha. In the case of a true Christian, the real Christ and his real teachings. So, that being said, we might as well take a final look at manifested and manifested Prakriti, so we can end this class with a good visual of the thing. Now, the same thing you've been saying here, and we took this a couple of visits ago, is here. So as we repeat it, we see that we have what's called the tip of the iceberg sticking out of this ocean of consciousness. The ocean of consciousness itself, and this is a really good visual for helping us to understand, the ocean of consciousness itself is called Purusha or Brahman. That's Purusha in that other chart we were looking at. And then you can see there's this sunlight of non-dual reality that's covering it all, and the sky of awareness that shoots through and through it. There are words for these things in Sanskrit. Paramakasha. We know we have the Bhutakasha, we have the Pranakasha, we have the Chidakasha, we have the Gyanakasha, and we have the Chid Akasha. And now look at the Paramakasha. It's like that fifth Russian doll into which all of the Russian dolls have been pulled, and which will come out of it again. It's the unchanging Brahman. As space, as a special space, like the para stage of the word we were looking at last week. Then there's also this light of radiance and intelligence that comes off it. And there's this ocean of existence which it abides in, and its tendency is to form into icebergs. That's through the devotion of the collective humanity and others, the ancestors. They want to see God with form. So they, through this desire and through this love, God is called to them in a form. And that form is created out of their very thought process. You have to be careful here. You're talking about Ishvara being a mere concept, you see. But remember, everything is a concept in this tradition. And so Ishvara is the highest, deepest, broadest, most powerful of all concepts. You're talking about a Jesus that millions of souls hold, both at this level and in the ancestor realm. You're talking about a Buddha that is worshipped at all levels of existence, about a Krishna that has lived for hundreds and thousands of years, like an iceberg that never did melt when a whole cycle passed. Everything else melted, but it didn't. It was like a crystallized iceberg that the sun of awareness couldn't melt. So when we say this, we don't say it lightly, that Ishvara is a concept of our mind, but still, when you can put it this way, when humanity loves so much or suffers so much and wants to see the truth come before them in the flesh, as Christianity would say, then their love will call the formless into a form. And that's what you call an avatar. Not in your Hollywood sense, by the way. That's the original Sanskrit word of that which descends into a form and sports a while and shows you the truth as an exemplar, and then gives up the form and will come again later as another iceberg. So that deep desire of collective consciousness, see, will call out of the Trinity a great avatar, maybe 10 of them. Vishnu gave rise to 10 avatars. And Buddha was one of them, by the way. Don't separate Buddha from India. Now, I'm going from the top down. These are very high concepts. And as you came down, here is the word that was in the beginning. Now, there is no beginning to these things. They are beginningless, middleless, endless, eternal, all-pervasive. You borrow words from English dictionary to try and describe it. But Om, too, is rather beginningless, middleless, and endless, according to the Tantras. Yet, that's where you can trace the origin of things to. In the beginning was the Word. So origins became very important to Christianity. But Christ really meant you should have based your religion on I and my Father are one, and be thee perfect as Father in heaven is perfect, and left origins at a relative state. See, if you based everything on origins, then people would start believing in birth, life, and death when they don't exist. They'd start believing in creation, preservation, and destruction when they don't exist. Begin to believe in end of days when that's only an appearance and everything comes back again. You'd start believing in these fallacious things and take them as real, and then for hundreds of years afterwards you'd begin thinking in those terms. Your children would be raised in those terms. And things like Ishvara, Divine Mother of the Universe, and And the real meaning of the word and your true nature would disappear to the background. Advaita Vedanta would go away. And then Lord Buddha or Krishna or someone would have to come back again and remind you of the relative nature of origins, that the word is a station, and that you use it. First it's in the beginning, then it was with God, close to it, and then it was God, so you can get to the Father through the Son. This might as well be the Son, because look at how the Trinity, out of which Jesus, Buddha, and others came, uses Om for its home. Om, Om on the range. This is the range, you see. So, a very, very deep, high, and even formless concept. Sometimes we call Ishvara formless form. And when you hear that in the songs of India, then you know who they're talking about. Formless form, that's Ishvara. Because you very rarely see it in form. But we all feel it. We feel it right here. There, in the heart, where all the nerve endings meet, like the spokes of a chariot wheel in the hub, abides the Atman. Stationary, but becoming manifold. Doesn't it sound like this? Like this? Stationary, but becoming manifold. Meditate on that self, Atman, as Om. Omit Jevam Jayatha Atmanam. Nice mantra. And Godspeed to you in crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness. See? So right out of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. In the remaining 5 or 6 minutes, we can describe basically the tip of the iceberg. That's everything manifested. Let's go back to this. Everything manifested from Mahat on down, after the dotted line, because everything that was unmanifested is pretty much nature without form. But when it starts to show a sign of a form, then you might say the tip of the iceberg is beginning to form, and things like intellect, ego, mind, the subtle elements, the senses, and the gross elements are all coming into manifestation. And as this sunlight of reality melts it, the water just returns to the ocean. And the more of the bulk comes forward. Now the bulk comes up and it shows that same thing again in cycles, so you think that maybe all there is nature, all there is form, all there is solidity. And you don't know that solidity is actually a thought in the mind of God. Formless matter, all worlds and all things and objects in potential. You can destroy the clay cup, you can't destroy the thought clay cup. So everything has gone back into its potential and will come back again as soon as that part just rises up again. And the bulk of the iceberg is always feeding it, always feeding it. So from the infinite, the finite has come, yet being infinite, only infinite remains. As one of the great slokas, Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate, one of those great peace chants says. So they want to explain this to you, and there's the gunas in equilibrium and then out of equilibrium. And there's God's mind, Hiranyagarbha, Mahat, the great mind, out of which everything spills. In this system, you would have to then include something like Om in it. So important. In this system, you might say Mahat would almost stand in for the word, God's mind. Now, the only thing else to show here is these 2 quotes. This will clarify it for you because he, Lord Kapila, is the father of this system, and everyone since then has revered him. All the Vedantists, all the Buddhists, all the yogis and so forth have looked back on Lord Kapila's 24 cosmic principles and said, finally we have a man who did his homework and came out and listed it for us. So we have no doubts as to what the inner universes consist of. Shaivism came along later and added 12 more subtle principles on top, so now you have 36. But this was the original 24, or add in God's mind, you might say 25. So this quote is very descriptive of that. There is a chain of transition from unmanifested or non-evolved nature to manifested nature and its evolutes, ending in the grossest evolute called earth. There is also a reverse transition of evolutes, ending in dissolution into unmanifested prakriti. So, sancharaha prati sancharaha. A flowing out and a flowing in. As far as our ideology in the West is concerned, it flows out, probably starting somewhere around here, and doesn't flow in anymore. Is this right? There's just senses and objects and matter and an end. So we have nowhere to go. And then why were we born, and where were we born from, and who are we? The questions rise. See, and no answers are given us by parents, by society, by religion that hasn't looked into the causes of things. So there's no reason why you cannot think beyond the box and begin to open up the possibilities of your heart and mind leading to your true self. No reason whatsoever. Even if it just be a mere experiment to begin, to see what's there inside of you. Ask and it shall be given, knock and it shall be opened. All the great souls have given you permission to do this. And Vedanta is just the wide open eye, see, the greatest barometer that is saying all religions are indigenous to your soul. See. Use any route you want, any method you want, but find that truth. And don't take any wooden nickels, don't stop. See. Make sure that you know the finite has come from the infinite. So a quote like that out of the Tattva Samasa Sutra, one of the oldest scriptures of India, about Samkhya Yoga, has telling you there's a transition and its evolutes, and there's a reverse transition back in. That cycles, that's what Buddha wanted out of, and it includes everything that called humans, insects, animals, ancestors, celestials, gods and goddesses, Trinity in its sweep. And those are eternal principles. They're just all changing and cycling all the time. What's at the head of all that is the unchanging witness, and that is you. That thou art. You see. Open your single eye of wisdom and see that. The final quote here, all that is perceived by the senses is finite. All that is beyond the senses is infinite. From the infinite, the finite has come, yet being infinite, only infinite remains. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hi. Om Bhadram Karnibhihi Sriniyamadevaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabir Yajatraha Stirairangayishtushtuvamsastanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the universe with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all others. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hare Om.